This is Big Ideas from the ABC.
The session today is built on the premise that we have big problems. We're not going to go over those necessarily today. We might revisit them as a matter of course, but we are primarily interested in addressing what most of us think needs to happen, and indeed that would extend to government, we believe. But there are either for lack of ideas or lack of ability to be backed with particular ideas, or to sufficiently understand how we could go about implementing such ideas, that we seem stuck. So we would like to indeed go at the question today, as put by Tim Jackson in his book Prosperity Without Growth. If infinite growth or continuous growth is unsustainable, but degrowth is unstable, what do we do to transition to a sustainable economy? Before we ask each speaker for their 5 to 10 minutes, I'd like to, I'm not quite putting them on the spot as it looks, I've prepped them for this. I'd like to ask them each for a quick grab on how you came to be in this space. What brought you to the work you do? Richard, do you want to kick us off? And don't forget your mic.
Yes, I was warned about this question. The answer is very simple. Rage. I wake up every morning with a white, hot, furious rage that such stupid decisions are made on our behalf, and as I'll expand later, that perfectly acceptable, appropriate options are perpetually overlooked under the nonsensical guise that by making stupid decisions with long-term implications, we're somehow, quote, helping the economy. It's ridiculous.
Thank you, Judge.
I was inspired by others. I get angry too, but I'm from Kenya, I'm Indo-Kenyan, and I started to work for a small organization called Echo News Africa. And the first task we had was to look at an agreement called the Multilateral Agreement on Investment. Some of you may have heard about it. And that was actually what spearheaded the movement that was demanding justice from the World Trade Organization and other financial agreements and organizations such as the WTO, the World Bank, and the IMF. So I met amazing people on that journey, including Vandana Shiva, including John Samuel, who's from the National Center of Advocacy Studies, and he was working on trying to improve the rights of Dalits in India, which is another huge issue that is going to require a change in the mindset. So I was inspired by amazing people, and I think that inspiration carried me a long way. So that's why I do what I do.
As Anthony well knows, this is a bit of a difficult one for me, especially to do in 1 minute. But I guess I could best describe it as I was reclaimed. I was reclaimed by nature, by the natural world. I had no intention of being in this space or ever sitting on platforms like this. I was in the corporate world, I was a businessman, I was doing what I was told by my parents from the beginning to do. Go out, get a good job, make a lot of money, and you'll be happy. And I did it reasonably well, and then I decided to go on a long walk. And I spent 4.5 months with my wife. We walked with a backpack in nature from 2,801 kilometres from the top of Scotland to the bottom of England through natural footpaths. And as I put it, there was no coming back. My life had changed. Physically, my body absorbed something which my intellectual brain, where I normally live, had no idea, didn't understand. So I have spent the last 3.5 years trying to make sense of that. I've done a lot of research, a lot of reading, and I guess I'm not quite at rage, Richard, but I'm sort of somewhere. I try to avoid rage at all costs, but I'm in the space of thinking we are so misguided. We are pursuing so many misguided ways of being in this world. We need change, and we need it urgently.
Thanks very much. All right, over to you, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, and look, thanks to you all for coming today. I'm not angry all day long. It's just how I wake up. But look, I mean it. I apologise in advance. I'm an economist, and most of the harm that we're doing to the planet is done in the name of my profession. It's done in the name of this abstract thing, the economy. That's become the ultimate sort of excuse for inequity. It's the ultimate excuse for harming the planet. So, as someone who claims at least to understand what economists think they know about the economy, I find that enraging. So, look, what do I want to talk about in 10 minutes today? I suppose let me start with the three things that I really want you to take out of what I've got to say. The first is that the economics of tackling climate change are easy. Okay? Easy. The politics are hard. That's all right. The politics of ending slavery was hard. But the economics of tackling climate change is easy. Point one. Point two, that governments can and have and will introduce policies that change our country and change other countries in ways that cost enormous amounts of jobs all the time. Okay? People losing their jobs is a very, very common occurrence. And if tackling climate change means someone loses their job, listen carefully, I don't care. I don't care. I care how we treat them when they've lost their job. I care how we help them get a new job. But the fact that change might mean someone loses their job is both as a citizen and an economist irrelevant to me. Do you remember that evil, job-destroying technology called digital cameras? Because what that puppy did was cost tens of thousands of jobs across Australia in photo development labs. Anyone here old enough to remember photo development labs? And do you remember the giant political debate about should we have digital cameras or should we have film? Do you remember this? No, neither do I. Because it never happened. It never happened. All right? Because things change all the time and people lose their jobs. And when people who profit from destroying the planet slip into this kind of, this fake suit of concern and pretend that they're the ones worried about unemployed people, well, it makes me sick. So the second point, I don't care if people lose their jobs, but I care how we help them afterwards. And then the third point is that it's just not true that our democracy can't cope with long-term problems where the costs are up front, the benefits are uncertain, and the benefits are in the future. It's just not true that our democracy can't handle a problem like climate change. It's not a wicked problem. It's just a problem we don't want to solve. And I'll give you a specific example. Australia is about to spend up to $50 billion, $50,000 million, $50 billion to build 12 new submarines to replace the 6 we haven't used yet. All right? 50 billion. Now let's just run through the arguments. Is Australia under some imminent attack? No. Is there any evidence that 12 submarines would be the answer to our problems if we were? No. If we spent the money today, would we see submarines tomorrow? No. Will they work? Probably not, especially if we build them in Adelaide again. But when it comes to defence, where the costs are up front, the threat is uncertain, the benefits are uncertain, and the benefits are in the distant future, when it comes to defence, no problem, $50 billion, it's not even a political debate. $50,000 million. Right? Picture 50 high schools with 1,000 kiddies at every high school, there's 50,000 people, and give each of them $1 million. That's what we're going to spend on submarines, just in case. Right? Now, environmentalists often talk about the precautionary principle as if it's something radical that's never been tried. It's called the defence budget. Right? And look, and I'm not saying we shouldn't spend money on defence. I'm just saying don't fall for the nonsensical rubbish that we as a society are incapable of making upfront decisions to spend money to solve a future problem. Anyone here insure their house or car? One person, Alan. That's good. The rest of them are going to make it hard for him to make this point. Because I, rather radically, along with Alan, I insure both my house and my car. And at the end of the year, I don't think, idiot, wasted my money again. Here was me taking unnecessary precautions against an unlikely eventuality that didn't occur, you idiot. What I actually think is, oh, phew, didn't crash my car. And then I go and insure my car again. Because as humans, as individuals, we spend money in the hope that we can mitigate future harm all the time. We buy four-wheel drives because we might go camping one day. All right? Yet what passes for economic debate in Australia contends that it would be silly for us to act on climate change because it might not happen. Now that's fine, it's a democracy, we can be as dumb as we want, but at least let's be clear about the inconsistencies within which the ways with which we deal with risk and the way with which we deal with collective action and risk. And again, bipartisan consensus for $50 billion worth of submarines, and you haven't even heard anyone talk about it. Because it's not a big deal, because here's the other thing, $50 billion is not a lot of money. Only an economist can say this, but it's true. Right, last year, our collective incomes in Australia were $1,500 billion. $1.5 trillion. A couple of billion is rounding error. No, that's not a joke, that bit's true. Actually, it's all true. But a couple of $billion is rounding error. You know, and our governments on our collective behalf drop billions of dollars into maybe it could work all the time. All right, it's just, of course $1 billion is a lot of money for you or I, it's a lot of money given to a particular company or a community. But a couple of $1 billion spread out across our community is, it's noise, it's statistical noise. You couldn't even find it when you went looking for it. So, you know, why, or how do we transition to a sustainable economy? Well, I gave a talk at the Festival of Dangerous Ideas on why we should abandon sustainability. I think it's a meaningless word, or it's become a meaningless word. But putting that talk aside, for today's audience, how do we achieve sustainability? Well, you just get on and do it. Right? You just do it. Because the point I was making before, we as a society make decisions all the time that cost people jobs. But the way to transition to a more sustainable society or economy is just please, if you remember one thing, remember this. Do more of the good things and less of the bad things. This is not hard. This is not hard. How do economists get people to how do you encourage people to do good things? This is first year economics, so listen very carefully. You subsidise the things you like and you tax the things you don't like. Well, the federal government spends $4.5 billion a year subsidising the mining industry. And then when Ardmona wants 25 million, we say, oh, we don't do subsidies. Oh no, subsidies are bad. $4,500 million a year in subsidies to extract the things that cause pollution. All right, so it's not hard. Step one, tax the things you want less of, subsidise the things you want more of. I'm not a big fan of subsidies, but broadly speaking, if you want people to go to ed school, make schools free. We do know how to do this. We've been doing it for hundreds of years. Regulation, it's not a dirty word. How do you stop people doing something you don't want them to do? You regulate. You know what? When it comes to tackling cigarette smoking, let's run through the list. What do? We tax them, yep. We regulate who can sell them. We regulate who can buy them. We regulate where you can smoke them. And then we run expensive advertising campaigns discouraging people from doing it. There's not one way to reduce people smoking. You just do a whole bunch of things that work. It's not rocket science. And then while you're doing it, You do more of the things that work best and less of the things that don't. You can be experimental along the way. So how do you transition to a more sustainable economy? Well, you stand up to the people doing the things you don't want. You say, I don't want you to keep doing that. And when they say, well, that's going to cost people jobs, you say, what, like digital cameras? All right, how am I going for time?
Spot on.
Spot on? All right, I'll just wrap up with this example. Once upon a time, the turn of the century, one of the biggest industries in the world was the ice industry. Ice. Right? Not methamphetamines, right? Big blocks of ice. Seriously, they used to cut it in ton blocks in Canada, pop it onto ships and sail it all around the world, including to Australia. All right, insulated boats wrapped in straw actually got ice from Canada to Australia. And then some bastard invented the fridge. That job-destroying fridge. Thousands of people lost their jobs. Yep, yeah, they did. It's what happens when we change things. You know what happens when you end whaling? Fewer people work in whaling. This happens. And we have to admit it. We have to be honest about it. And we have to not let the people that want to pollute the planet look like the ones to pretend to care about jobs. Because I grew up in New South Wales, Hunter Valley, when the mining industry shed 20,000 jobs in the mid-80s to the mid-90s. 20,000 workers in the mining industry they sacked. It wasn't the carbon tax. They invented these machines that just dug through coal and dug through jobs. So they sacked everybody. They don't care about jobs. They care about making profits. So how do you transition to a more sustainable economy? Do more of the things you want to do less of the things you don't want to do, and when people complain, either tell them to shut up or bribe them.
Thanks, Richard. Judge it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was excellent. And you made my task so much easier talking about these issues. So what are those good things that we should be doing? And my background is in the area of agriculture, global agriculture. And I just got this really amazing document from the ETC group. They're called Erosion, Technology and Concentration. They're an action group on this, and they're based in Canada. And they did this study looking at who feeds the world. And they found out that the industrial food chain, so industrial food chain, if you want me to define that, I can go into it, but it's the supermarkets, the big transporters, the big agricultural companies, the Nestle's, the Kraft Foods of this world. They only feed 30% of the world, okay? But they produce 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions. All right. Now, the other thing I found out was they use 80% of the fossil fuels, 70% of the water, and of course, they deforest 13 million hectares and destroy 75 billion tons of topsoil. They only feed 30% of us. The rest of us are fed by what this report calls the peasant food web. The 2 billion of the hungriest on this planet are fed by small-scale agriculture. So one of the good things that we have to do is to invest in small-scale agriculture, not to hope that Monsanto is going to rescue farmers in Kenya, because it isn't. Monsanto is not about rescuing farmers. Monsanto is about making profits. Do not give power to the companies that do not care about food security, water security, forest security, and about the planet, about the gases, about the methane, the carbon dioxide, and the nitrous oxide that agriculture is producing. So that this investment in small-scale agriculture is really, really important. Now, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, just put out a report in September last year saying, wake up before it is too late. The United Nations, which historically, has taken quite a mainstream approach to these issues. But if the United Nations is coming up and saying this, we really need to listen as governments, right? And literally say that these are the good things we can do in Australia and elsewhere. The other thing I'd like to say is degrowth being unstable. And we got the really interesting example of ice and about digital cameras. Mobile phones are another example. In India, the email and all that is getting rid of the telegraph service in India. It's a huge service. We don't know where our postal services are going to go. But this is the nature of the game. This is the way it is. And we do need to come up with these smart arguments when we're told it's too hard. So degrowth is unstable. The question I ask is, then when the monsoons flood Assam and the other northeastern states of India, this is happening. It's not something that's going to happen. It's happening. And 9 million people have to move out. Is that not unstable? Huh? When 10,000 square kilometers of the Gobi Desert is increasing every day, is that not unstable? Okay. When now it has been proven, right, by scientists that the 2011 drought in Somalia was because of climate change, and 1,500 people were crossing the border into Kenya every day until those camps had millions of people there. Is that not unstable? We're talking about just a couple of hundred people that come in boats. We're talking about millions are going to move. And then what are we going to do about the boat people and the things that we say here which are outrageous? We don't even have a policy to deal with climate change refugees. The UNHCR doesn't have one. We don't recognize them. When I looked it up, there were just 2 countries in the world to think about this. But they are starting, they're there. 50 million people are displaced because of this. And there was an atoll in PNG. It's called Carteret. It's completely underwater. These people are going to have to move. They understand it. Okay? So are we going to get to that point where we are underwater and then we start talking underwater? Or do we really, really make the change now? And that change is made through advocacy, through our own behavioral change. Now, one challenge I'll throw out there is the production of meat. The way the industrial food chain is producing meat, it uses from 5 up to 10 times more water. All right? Not to mention all the other sort of gases we put out into the atmosphere. But if we said we won't eat meat 1 day a week, just 1 day a week, as all of us, my God, wouldn't that make a big change? So little changes by us, and absolutely going and saying that we don't believe in the nonsense that is being thrown out to us, this scaremongering, this fear, because policies are not made sort of, we should not respond to that fear. We should respond to the truth. Yeah. Are we going for time? Finish?
You've got more time if you want.
I've got a little bit more time. No, I'll leave it there. I don't have to take it. I'll give it to you. Thank you.
That's right. Thank you, Judge. Thank you very much. Thanks, Keith.
Thank you. I guess I come slightly differently at this. I go to the premise of the question that talks about how do we transition the economy. And there is this massive assumption underlying that question that we accept that the economy needs to be transitioned. And I think that, I'm guessing, but probably an awful lot of the people in this room, or great percentage, believe that, as I do. But until we have a majority that really grasp that really get that message, then we can get very angry, we can get frustrated about it, we can try and do a little bit, but nothing major is going to happen, and we will perceive that we are part of yet another group fighting against the establishment. The politicians, the big dirty polluters, the nasty industrialists. And I think, I reflect back on my own situation. It took me 4.5 months of walking in nature to get it, that actually we're pretty screwed up in how we're pursuing life at the moment. I don't think you need to walk for 4.5 months, well, it certainly helps. But, we have to get a majority on board where, to use the words that I was reading recently in a chap called Steve Emmett's book, the head of computational science at Microsoft, a professor at Cambridge and Oxford in the UK, who said, we urgently need to do, and I mean actually do, something radical to avert a global catastrophe. And I mean, it's holding that statement and saying, yes, we do need to do something. We're on track for a global catastrophe. And everything else then becomes relatively easy. I think you referred to it, Richard. The answers aren't that difficult once we really acknowledge the need for this change. But we have a very strong mindset that the current system must be preserved. It's been a successful system in some ways. We've achieved an awful lot over the last 50, 100 years. I actually think that most of the problems have been done in my lifetime. It's my generation. It's the last 30 or 40 years where we've really gone out of whack. When I talk to friends, and a lot of them in the business world, they're working in this paradigm of everything is about wealth creation. You create more money, you create economic growth, that drives employment, we're all happier. And there's meant to be a trickle-down effect that benefits everyone. And anyone who's looked at those figures knows that the trickle-down effect stopped quite a while ago. There's now this great disparity in wealth. And but go back to this, what is happening in the economy? People say to me, well, okay, Keith, it's unsustainable, but we've got a population problem. You know, we're like a virus. It's, we're just expanding rapidly. We've got to stop the population growth. And certainly that is one element of it. But as it was developed in a formula by a couple of scientists back in the 70s, early 70s, Paul Ehrlich said, you've got population growth, you've got economic growth, and then you've got technology, which can work for you or against you. Sometimes technology can reduce the amount of stuff we consume, but the amount of resources that go into the products we consume, but it can also, and often does, work the other way. Technology works to increase the attractiveness of things and decrease the price. So we want them now, and we want more of them. So actually technology, I hear other people say, technology will save us. And I go, well, actually not under the current system. Population growth in the last 50 years, we've doubled the population. We've gone from 3.5 billion to passing through 7 billion. It's rapid growth. In the last 50 years, the economy has grown fivefold. 65 trillion, I think, was the figure I saw. So we've got economic growth powering on 4 times ahead of what the population growth would have done. So it's our apparently unquenchable thirst for consuming more and more and more stuff. And of course, it's driven by marketing. So, to some degree, we're conditioned rats, or as I tell my sons, you're a hamster, you're on the hamster wheel. You're being told, earn, so you can go and get more and more stuff, which you're told by people will make you happier. It'll change your life, and of course, it doesn't. Very soon after you buy it, you actually don't think it was much different anyway, your life, and was it worth it? But you keep on the treadmill. And it's very hard. People say to me, well, you can say that, Keith. You've been on there, you've, developed some wealth. And I say, well, okay, maybe I have, but at least I want to try and do something to fix it now. To describe to you what happened to me when I came back from this walk, the day after I got back to Melbourne, I woke up in the morning. I got out of bed feeling very odd that I was getting up in my home after all that time, and I opened the wardrobe door. And I literally fell back on the bed, sat down on the corner of the bed, and looked at this wardrobe. And for the first time ever, that wardrobe was like a backpack that I was carrying. It was full of clothes. And I looked at it agog going, what do I do with all these? Why have I got all these? How am I ever going to choose something? And I'm not making this up. There was a mental process that I had gone through that this stuff was not attractive, that I should be trying to accumulate it. This was stuff I wanted to get away from. I'm sitting here today wearing a T-shirt which is my favourite T-shirt. It may look a bit scungy. I put it on purpose. It carries the brand that I most want to advertise. In the middle there are two little Dans. It was a T-shirt that I wore on the walk. It was one that when I got back got moth-eaten. I was going to throw it out and get a new one, because that's what you do. When my cousin said, my 91-year-old mother darns woolen T-shirts like yours, it's a merino T-shirt. And I said, but you can't, don't put us through all that trouble. And she said, you don't understand, my mother is looking to have a purpose in life. She's a wonderful darner. She will be so pleased to do that for you. I let her darn it. Now I wear it with pride. It is the most attractive T-shirt for me. It bears the brand that I want to advertise. It's about, let's recognise the human skills, the human side of this wonderful world we live in, and begin to challenge or be prepared to challenge the system. So the system needs to change, absolutely no doubt about it. We do, though, I would say, need to have two words which don't often get talked about from what I've seen, certainly in political and government circles and on the media, and that's compassion and collaboration. People say to me, oh, you're naive, that's Pollyanna stuff. It actually, if you strip back to some of the fundamentals of the human race, we are compassionate and collaborative people. Some argue that collaboration is the single most important feature that has got us where we are today. But we've chosen to ignore that and move off on this hyper-individualistic, let's live alone, let's not connect with our community, let's try and have it all ourselves, a bigger home, more gadgets, and if you fill that and you're doing well, then you better go and get a holiday home and fill that with gadgets. Back to the simple things, but we're all in this space. The businessmen are in this space, the big dirty polluters, as I often hear the power companies talked about, they're just sending the energy that we want so we can hit a switch and turn the lights on and the air conditioning on in our home. These people are not bad people. Yes, there's some bad people, but there's an awful lot of good people working in politics, in business, and in the environmental movements who believe they're doing the right thing. We've got to recognise we're all part of this, welcome everybody into the space, and find ways to collaborate. There is a wonderful opportunity, and all kinds of things. I mean, people say to me, well, what do you do? And I say, well, all of us, everybody can do three things, pretty much in Australia. One, they can take a serious look at their consumption patterns and reduce. You don't need it. And the more you figure you don't need it, the more happier you suddenly become. It's strange, that. And then you've got more time, and maybe you don't need to work as much. There's a think tank in the UK, I'm sure Richard's heard of it, the New Economics Foundation recognises we should be probably aiming for about an 18-hour work week. If you didn't need as much money, you didn't need as much stuff, maybe that becomes a feasible option. We also can be supporters of good people we see doing good things. Support the right shopkeepers, selling good products, doing the right thing, building community. And the third thing is almost everyone in Australia has got some interest in the investment market. Superannuation is massive in Australia. So ask questions of the people that manage your money. It's very hard, I recognise that, and I'm talking to other people, we're trying to bring some change there, but it's very hard. But start asking the questions and demanding that you have beliefs and you want to see your money aligned with your beliefs. So, Anthony, is that okay? 10 minutes?
Thank you. Thanks, Keith. Thanks very much for that initial offering to the three of you. Now, let's open up the conversation. And if I can start it, but please do put your hands up and I'll come to you next. We've heard a range of perspectives so far, then, on the question. If I can focus in on one element of our predicament, which can attract the term overshoot. So it's been some years now we've been found to be in excess of what one planet can handle of us. And then some people have gone ahead and worked out carbon budgets and the like that are vastly less than our current footprints. So that's inferring a need to evolve an economic system that isn't locked into growth patterns. Do you guys see it that way? Or if not, how do you see it?
Look, I think it's really important, sorry to be semantic, the planet is going to be fine. Right? The planet's going to be fine. What we're trying to protect here is the current society that many of us don't like very much. Right? The planet's going to be trucking around the sun, no problem at all. The species mix in a million years is going to be different, regardless of anything we do. The thing that we're trying to sustain is not the planet, but modern consumer capitalism. I mean, that's the bizarre part of all this. You know, all of us running around saying, we can't keep doing this forever. What we're really sort of saying is, you know, maybe Marx was right. The system's unsustainable. So I think we have to be really clear, sorry to be semantic, the planet is going to track around the sun just fine. Species are going to continue to come and go. We might cause the most incredible changes in a short period of time, and they're changes that concern me, and as I said, that make me feel a little bit antsy in the morning sometimes. But the planet is going to be all right. The thing that's unsustainable is the culture that we've created, and people living the affluent lifestyles that we've created. The irony is, if we want to actually stay affluent, we actually need to learn to restrict ourselves. But where I would separate from some of the other panellists, I do think that there are bad people out there actively making bad decisions. Any company that campaigned to rip up the carbon price, any company that was out there saying, I'm going to spend my shareholders' money pushing Australia away from a solution, is doing active harm to the environment. There might be some nice people who work there, you know, but they are committed to an objective that not only ignores the science of climate change, but ignores what I think is a broad community acceptance of the need for change. So I think we just need to be clear what it is we're trying to hang on to. What we're trying to hang on to is the richest culture the world has ever known. You know, Australia is one of the richest countries in the world. We're living at the richest point in world history. Climate change might take that away from us. You know, and if the irony is, it's actually quite a conservative thing to want to do, is to keep things the way they are. I'd also add a fourth thing to do, the individuals, to save the planet. There's a clipboard floating around. If you put your email address on it, the Australia Institute will send you lots of information on how to win fights with economists.
Yeah, my view is that we need a complete overhaul of the variety of capitalism that we have created. This kind of capitalism where 6 companies own the world's seed, you know, 6 international traders trade in food, they trade in 100% of the food that we have. This is not the kind of capitalism we want. The other thing is I want to focus on the issue of equity. Again, I'll give you the example of India. 50 million people in India have diabetes, and again we hear about how India is growing. The economic growth is high, and it's going to become an emerging nation, it's going to become an emerging power. 44.4% of children in India under the age of 5 are malnourished. Okay? So many of them don't survive. It is not equitable. Who is growing? The thing is, who is growing? At whose expense? This is a question that we have to ask. We have to aggregate this thing, you know. So when we hear about GDP for whom? 500 million people in India are not on the ladder of growth. They're going the other way. 700 million people don't have access to a toilet. They don't have sanitation. So is this the time to be putting in proper toilets which are sustainable and not to be, flushing fresh drinking water down the toilet? Is this the time to be having, proper sustainable solutions? Or is this the time to make the banking industry more rich, to get the auto industry more rich, to focus on the pharmaceutical industry in India and completely ignore the needs of the poor? Because whenever you hear about India, you hear about Infosys, you hear about their IT, you hear about the phone systems, what is it called? When they call centers, thank you. This is what you hear about all the time. But very few people work in that sector. 60 to 70 people, 60 to 70% of that 1.3 billion people in that country are working in some way or the other in agriculture. We are going to have to grapple with this, in one way or the other. This world capitalist system that we have is wrong. It needs to be overhauled. The World Trade Organization and its various agreements are not about sustaining everyone, about equitable growth. These agreements are about making profits for a few. So what we are doing is we have an agreement in the WTO called the TRIPS Agreement on Intellectual Property Rights, where we are guaranteeing property rights for the rich, for Monsanto, for private capital. We're extending private property rights to plants and plant genetic resources, yet there are no property rights for people, for small farmers over their land. That land is being grabbed left, right, and center in the name of food security and economic growth. So property rights for the majority are gone, property rights for the few are. I'm talking about the developing world. We have another agreement, the agreement on agriculture. It's all about reducing tariffs and reducing subsidies. Yeah, we have all these subsidies going to the mining sector. That's fine. So who writes these rules? And we really have to put that pressure up again. We had that pressure in the 90s, early 2000s, before this whole terrorism stuff that started. These huge groups that would go outside the WTO meetings, outside the World Bank meetings, and say there's something wrong with global capitalism and this variety of capitalism. Okay? I'm not advocating for socialism. I'm just saying this variety of capitalism is really problematic. Though that sort of movement needs to start up again. We really need to connect these issues. Climate change, the global trade system, the global financial system. Who speculates on food? They speculate on food, on rice, on wheat. When I mean about these funds that we have, the super funds, go and ask questions. Where is this money going? Because these days we're speculating on coffee, we're speculating on rice, because we make money on these commodities. There's no more money to be made in the housing sector, so put them into food. So what happens? The price of food goes up, and it comes down, and it goes up, and you don't have to really follow the market and be a great economist to understand that. Just go ask the farmers in Kenya, and they will tell you the price was here last year, it's here this year, it's here last year, and people came with guns to steal our coffee because the price of coffee had gone up. So instability is there now, and we need an overhaul of this system of capitalism, this system of globalization that we have created.
Let me make it clear that I believe we do need to evolve capitalism. I believe we need various people from within the business world have written books about the need for capitalism to evolve to another level. I simply say that the people that we often talk about and brand as bad people are simply following the system that has been established. They're not doing it thinking they are doing bad things. Yes, there are some, but they are fundamentally following the system and feeling they are doing the right thing for people. Even when I read the terrible article after the global financial crisis where some trader in America had made $1.5 billion by betting against the Greek nation and sending people to the war. But, is he a fundamentally bad person? Maybe we can get into that, but I don't think he did it thinking this is a bad thing, I hate these people, I want to send them to the war. He's a financial trader. This is what you're meant to do, find things to bet on and bet against. Now, we need recognition the system is broken. Currently, 2/3 of the top 175 economies in the world are not countries, they are corporations. They're too big to manage, and we need to move through a phase of change to see us gravitating more to smaller run organisations that are connected to the communities they're operating in and the products they're making for. But I don't cast these people out and say they're bad people. They're following the system. That's why I said at the start, I believe we need to broaden this recognition of what is going on. I agree with Richard. The world is not in trouble. The planet will keep going. We are currently beginning our way through the 6th mass extinction. That's how I look at it. I don't talk about climate change any more than I talk about soil degradation or water shortages or mental health issues, the whole myriad, or obesity. They are all symptoms of the fact that our current system is having a very bad impact on life on this planet. And all the evidence is, people look at it and go, it's probably going to take our species out as well. But at the moment, we're currently wiping out 50% of life on the planet as we know it. And, you know, it's been 65 million years since the meteorite took out the dinosaurs. The Earth recovered, the Earth will recover if we go. But it seems a great shame, with all the consciousness we have and everything we've learned, that we can't band together and change. And, you know, people say to me, well, what else? And you go, well, you know, yes, we should be. I'm an accountant originally. We should be taxing the bad things. I know very conservative people who say, you know, one of the taxes that we really ought to implement is 100% death duties. It kind of takes away the whole reason for trying to build up wealth. You know, if it all goes at the end of your life, you come into the world with nothing, it all goes at the end. But we have this mindset to keep going, keep building. So a lot of things we can do, but you have to get a broader agreement. At the moment, the people in the government, not that I'm a supporter of this government, but the people in the government, I'm certain, think they are doing the best thing for this country and the people in it. And we have to change that mindset that we need to change, and that sticking with the present system is not the safe thing to do and the logical thing to do. It is the riskiest thing we can possibly do. And once you do that, it becomes very liberating. And then all these other ideas that are on the table and all the other things that we know can work, they come into play.
Thank you. Over to you guys. I invite hands if you'd like to contribute. Yeah, thanks, Josh. Go ahead. And there is a mic which will rove to you. Thanks.
Thanks. Josh Floyd from the Centre for Australian Foresight. A question that I'd initially like to pose to you, Richard. You say that the economics of tackling climate change is easy. So in addressing climate change, what implications do you see for the overall scale of global economic activity, and how does that relate to your view that the economics is easy?
I'm sticking to my guns. I think that the economics of dealing with any form of pollution is straightforward. We teach it in first year, and we've got a range of market and non-market tools available to us. The problem is the introduction of those tools, the explicit purpose. Just like banning whaling will lead to lower profits for whalers, banning new coal-fired power stations will lead to lower profits for people who either sell coal-fired power stations or build coal-fired power stations. So the political consequences of the simple economics are the hard part. The second part of your question, what's the impact on GDP? What does it mean for economic growth? Here, I guess I might depart with perceived wisdom. I don't care about GDP. I don't care about it so much that I don't want it to grow at zero. I don't care what it grows at. I just want us to make good decisions that make us happy and healthy. And if the consequence of making good decisions that make us happy and healthy lead to a slight reduction in GDP, I don't care. And if the consequence of pursuing decisions that make us happy and healthy lead to an increase in GDP, I don't care. Because all GDP is an indicator of how much stuff that got bought and sold. All right? And there's a very strong correlation between the amount of stuff that gets bought and sold and the amount of environmental harm we do at the moment. But it doesn't have to be that way. You know, Alan and I were talking about this before. If Alan pays me to mow his lawn and I pay him to do my washing, and we're both happy, did we just ruin the planet? Like, did you all just feel like your lives get worse because Alan and I engage in mutually beneficial trade? However, if I agree to buy 1 billion tonnes of coal off Alan and burn it and pollute your atmosphere, you should care. So I guess what I'm saying is I think that as citizens we should realise that GDP is just one indicator of market economic activity. And when our politicians brag to us about their incredible ability to shift one simple indicator, we kind of should roll our eyes and yawn at them. You know, my point is it's not something to be proud of, but it's also not something to be ashamed of. It's just an indicator. And just because they want it to grow as fast as it can doesn't mean it's obvious that we should make it grow as slow as it can. We should just demand the policies we want. If you want to work 19 hours a week, you should work 19 hours a week. All right, I have 6 weeks holidays a year because that's a lot better than 4. All right, it's 50% better than 4. All right, and does that have some impact on GDP? Yes, it does. Because we don't measure the fun I have on holidays, but you do measure the income I get when I work. So if you all want to work less and the economy shrinks, who cares? Right? Oh, good. Sorry, unexpected applause ruined my narrative. So I was going to tell you who cares. Who cares is the people that want to sell you useless crap. All right? Because the cost of me having 2 weeks holidays, 2 weeks extra holidays, all right, the cost of that is slightly lower income, and the consequence of that is I buy less stuff. All right? They want you to work hard to force you to spend the income. You know, an affluenza that, you know, Clive Hamilton and I wrote about, the whole obsession with borrowing money you don't have to buy things you don't need to impress people you don't like.
I bought props. I'm glad I did. Timeless classic, Richard, timeless classic. So this is an interesting point. Some of you may have heard of the Australian National Development, in fact, straw poll, always fond of a straw poll. Who's heard of the Australian National Development Index? A fair smattering. Yeah, so there's a number of organisations, including ACF, and I can't remember the others off the top of my head, but they're developing this thing, and their objective is that is the primary national set of accounts, a composite indicator basically, to get more to the point of what you're saying. So we refer primarily to what will show us what we really want to gain. Do you think do we need to do that? We need to change our sort of primary points of reference? I'm
going to make some enemies here. No, the Australia Institute published the Genuine Progress Indicator in 1997 and again in 2001. I worked on probably 5 or 6 of these projects. I think they're intellectually useful. I think they help us understand what matters and what doesn't. But let me just spell it out for you. There's no indicator that will ever be invented that encapsulates the passions and desires of a nation. GDP isn't that. The people who invented GDP, to paraphrase them, said things like, this is a great thing we've invented GDP. It's going to be a really good indicator of how much stuff people buy and sell. Please don't ever use it as an indicator of how well the country's going. But the people who developed it said never use it for the purpose for which it's used. And I've been involved in, as I said, probably 6 attempts to come up with broader indicators. But I think it's a fool's errand to think we can find the indicator that will balance environment and society and inequality and jobs, and then we'll just sort of put some weights in, and then there's the number. Let me explain it to you this way. When a car magazine sits down to come up with the car of the year, it has all these well, let's look at the price and how fast it goes and its fuel economy. You get about half a dozen or a dozen criteria, and then the car magazine says, this is the best car of the year. And most of us think, well, I don't want it. Right? Because no one set of indicators, and we don't weight things in the same way. So the idea that we put together the Andy index or any other index and then say, right, we've run the numbers and we are going to build this coal mine right next to the Great Barrier Reef, and yes, I have included the environment in my calculation and I've weighted it by the following amount, so shut up. Right? There is no indicator that can give us the meaning of life. And just because GDP is a bad indicator doesn't mean a bunch of progressives coming up with their own is a good indicator. If it helps us explain to people the problems with GDP, great. If you think for a minute that Cabinet are going to sit around in a democracy and say, oh, well, what does the summary indicator say? Oh, well, then that's exactly what we should do. It's ridiculous. It's not how democracy works.
So I take from that it's context to what we've got that is the most important thing. Thanks, Peter. Go ahead. There'll be a mic, so hang on a sec.
Hello. Two of you spoke about the instability. One will be the catastrophe that's going to happen further down the track. But in terms of going to a no-growth economy, it's the instability that happens in the short term as distinct from the catastrophe that's going to happen in the long term. Neither of you have addressed the question of how we handle the disruption that's going to happen when you take us off the growth treadmill. What do you have in mind? How are we going to handle it? And what's it going to look like?
Did everybody get that? Did you hear it okay? Yeah, go for it, Keith.
I think we've already talked a bit about how there is this presumption that this is a massive change. Everything's going to change. And how scary that will be. This process is happening all the time. I think, Richard, you referred to some industries that had gone under. Part of the capitalist or industrial system, they talk about, creative destruction and starting again with things. So that process is going on. I think what's important is that where, for instance, the government is supporting it, then the government is supporting local community things that are relevant. I looked at, I don't know whether there are car industry workers in the room, but for me, seeing car industries owned by companies on the far side of the world supplying products to people all over the world and being built in a couple of cities in Australia, I don't think that's really something that's fundamentally sustainable or worth trying to sustain. Probably up at SPC in Shepparton is a bit different. It's a local community selling products locally. But this destruction, this change is going on all the time. And even when you are pursuing endless economic growth, we tend to go grow, 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 bang, recession. So even with the endless economic growth paradigm, that is something that we're used to not happening all the time. I think it does mean that people need to be individually resilient. We need to develop, recognise that we're all responsible for ourselves and our family and our community and work to become as resilient as possible. I think the more you wean yourself off a need to, the drug of more stuff, you're actually helping yourself become a lot more resilient. And we need governments that support the change where appropriate. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Jed.
Thank you for that question. I think change is already happening. It's happening because some people don't have a choice. When we had the food crisis from 2006 to 2008, many communities changed. Now, one of the biggest changes that happened in a place like India was that they moved away from growing rice and wheat to growing millets. Now, millets were the food security crop. They don't need that much water. They're quite resistant to lots of pests, and they are the crop to grow. That's a smart thing to do. But in came the FAO and the World Bank, and we had the Green Revolution, and we brought in all these high-yielding varieties of rice, and our biodiversity, as we know, is shrinking. But this movement is seeking to reverse that and to save seeds. Millions of people are involved in it in India, out of need. They're doing it already. Number two, I don't know how many of you know, but the city of Sao Paulo in Brazil has banned advertising completely. People were very, very worried. Oh, this is going to cause problems. We're going to have economic disaster. Our growth is going to come down. It didn't happen. In fact, for once, you can see the building for what it is instead of the posters that are put up there. You can actually appreciate art. Now here, wherever we look, there's advertising. Even on a receipt, there's nowhere where you can look nicely and just treat your eyes. Right? That's probably why you got shocked when you got back. But we can do it. Advertising needs to be responsible. We have models. In the Nordic countries, I think Sweden, they banned advertising to children. Why? Because the harm that we're causing in the long term is not worth it. So these sorts of small examples are already happening, and we need responsible advertising. We need to tax. And I agree completely with Richard, what we're doing with this carbon tax is awful. And we really need to raise our voices loudly and say, no, we need to tax the mining companies, and we need to tax all those companies the polluters need to pay for this, that are polluting the environment. It is very, very important that this is done. Okay, so there are a few models that are working. Thanks.
Look, again, just in case people misunderstand, let me start by saying I care more about the social and personal cost of unemployment than most economists and most people in public debate. I think we should increase unemployment benefits. I think we should stop blaming the unemployed for their plight. Thank you. But regardless of who's in office and regardless of whether we have carbon taxes, people will lose jobs. So the context you need to understand is that in Australia, with 23 million people, in an average month, around 260,000 people lose their jobs. But luckily, about 270,000 people get new jobs. And the Australian Bureau of Statistics reports both those numbers, which are widely ignored, and the one we pay attention to is employment went up by 10,000. So that when we hear, a factory closed and 2,000 people lost their job, we think, that's massive. Well, actually, it's a tragedy when a factory closes and 2,000 people lose their jobs, but in the incredible turmoil that is our labour market, hundreds of thousands of people switching between employed and unemployed, or between employed here and employed there, hundreds of thousands of people switching every month is the default. So how will we cope with change? In the same way we coped with the photo development labs, invisibly. But when there are periods of rising unemployment, there are things government can and should do. In terms of the politics, however, and this sort of comes back to, I don't think it's all about awareness, and I think advertising is very important. So let me give you an example. I've polled this multiple times over more than 15 years. About 90% of Australians think we should ban junk food advertising during children's viewing hours. 90%. There's no democratic problem here. There's no awareness problem. There is nothing except that a small bunch of people who make billions of dollars selling sugar in a box to kids don't want the change. So yes, when it comes to how do we change the world, we've got to inform people. Well, guess what? We know that giving fat little kids lots of sugar makes them fatter. Tick. We know that. We know the purpose of the ad that sells sugar to fat little kids is to make them want more of it. Tick. And for 15 years, we haven't solved the problem. It's not because of a lack of awareness, it's because of political power concentrated in the hands of a few people who can actually get a government website pulled down like that.
We're right at the back next. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, hi, yeah. When are we going to make this happen? I hear about, we consume less.
Could you speak right into the mic?
Yeah, I'm just asking, when are we going to make this happen? I hear about, we buy less stuff, we check how much stuff we consume, and about raising our voices. But we have a government at the moment which is the most un-environmentally friendly government in. How are we going to make this happen, accelerate the change? What do you suggest?
Can I add something to that too, just with reference to the last comment? The concentrated power that stands in the way of seemingly a shoe-in democratic process, that concentration of power in turn comes from somewhere, which of course is its customer base, right? So what's the connection perhaps as well between that question and that concentration base? Would one of you guys like to get us going?
I think for me the fundamental paradigm shift, and I'm not saying I have an answer as to how this and when this is going to happen, we need to, I go back to what I said about, 2/3 of the top 175 economies are companies now. Companies have become bigger than countries. Companies are run to make a return for their shareholders. Directors are legally obliged to run companies that way. It's in the corporations law. That needs to change. People who run corporations need to be responsible, yes, to their shareholders, but they need to be responsible for other global measures to do with sustainability. We talk about triple bottom line. There's no way, as it was once explained to me, of effectively combining triple bottom line into a measure. And a lot of companies are really switched on to sustainability and trying to do it, and they don't know how. And certainly one of the things through our OASIS and our courses, we're looking to work with businesses to help them really grasp the depth of sustainability. But we need to bring change at the corporate level. Corporate level drives most of what goes on, and we are in a system which is generally held up as being the best one we've had, which is this idea of free trade and world trade. It's not working properly. We need to change at the corporate level. And how do we do that? We do that through our actions and through what we tell our politicians that we want.
Let's stick with the hands because they've been waiting for a long time. Unless there was a burning comment, yeah?
I'd just add to that, why do you think they donate to political parties? Why do you think that lobbying is one of the most lucrative industries in the country? I mean, I hate to say it. Why do we fail? Because well-meaning people close their eyes to how our democracy actually functions. Well-meaning people think, yes, let's put a full-page ad in the paper saying, let's tackle climate change. I don't know about you, but I missed the full-page ad that said tax cuts for the rich. Somehow they can deliver. They can deliver their legislative agenda with no public awareness campaign, with no mass email list, with none of the things that many people think are part and parcel with participation in democracy. So don't just ask yourself, what can we do? Which is a good question, but I haven't got time to tell you what I think. But it's important. Ask yourself a different question. What are the winners doing? All right, if you're losing, someone's winning. And you can keep asking yourself what you should do better, or you can actually look carefully, critically, with no scales on your eyes at what the winners are doing. And it doesn't look much like what progressives are doing.
Something to go on with, yeah, thank you.
A comment on advertising that you just referred to. In the UK, the Nationwide Building Society, which is an obvious alternative to the greedy banks because it's owned by the members rather than shareholders, has recently had McDonald's sponsor the back of their receipts when you take out money out of an ATM. So I made a formal complaint to Nationwide about this, and I said, this isn't why people belong to a mutual. So maybe just if you see something that you think is wrong, say something about it, even if it's to a big corporation. And
thank you.
Maybe by the time I get back to the UK, McDonald's will no longer be sponsoring the back of the receipts. And also at 6 o'clock tonight, there's a screening of a documentary from the UK called Connected, a film about change. And you could also watch it online at globaldocumentary.org. But I'd encourage you to go and see it in Federation Square and take part in the conference on the 27th of March.
Just quickly, thanks. Now, I've been probably blind to this side, but I'm asking for some self-censorship or some honesty. Who's had their hand up for a while? Has there been anyone over here who's been the last 10 minutes going, me? I was asking this side first because I'm looking this way. Was there anyone? No, good, all right. So who this side has had their hand up forever? Thanks. Go ahead, the mic will come to you. Hang on a sec.
Thank you. Economists, can you tell us, regarding the current divestment movement that's gathering momentum, what sort of a backlash can you tell us to expect? Can you sort of indicate to us that we can expect from those who won't like us?
So the question was about divestment. The Australia Institute's got a couple of papers coming out in the next couple of months on divestment. I think it's really important. I think it's really interesting. I think it's really useful. And I'm saying that first because I'm about to focus on a weakness of it. Divestment won't stop mines getting built. Mines are built when they are profitable to build them and someone's willing to risk their money pursuing that profit. And if everyone here divested their superannuation out of fossil fuels, that would be a fantastic thing. And in coming months, I think you'll be presented with a range of easier ways to do that. That's a good thing. But don't doubt for a minute that some Saudi billionaire literally won't put $1 billion in to build a mine if we pull the money out. So divestment, I think, is very important, but it's important that people understand what it's good at. What it's great at is removing the social license from these activities. It makes me sick when I hear someone on radio say, well, my company's just made record profits and everyone should shut up and stop complaining because if you've got superannuation, I'm putting money in your pocket right now. Whether you realise it or not, I'm helping you. You know, I'm doing this for you. Well, no, you're not. I don't want you to do it. So individuals divesting out of fossil fuels is a great way to show not just yourself but others how seriously you take the issue. Institutions like churches and universities divesting is a great way for them to signal to their constituencies that they accept the science, they accept the morality, and they accept the need for change. And that is going to make a much better political climate within which we can push for the regulatory changes we'll need. But I hate to say it, even if everyone in Australia divests, there'll be plenty of foreigners that will still want to build profitable coal mines. And I know this because the Australian mining industry is already 80% Australian owned. So we can't really be massive divestors because we don't even own the mines that are profiting from our coal. What's that?
Yeah, thank you, John.
No, 80%, 80% of mining activity in Australia is foreign owned. There is no Australian mining industry. There are mining companies that operate in Australia.
I just wanted to add that it raises awareness. So if you look at history and what happened in South Africa, the divestment actually raised awareness on the apartheid regime. But just on that, somebody asked what we can do. Perhaps during colonial India, when Gandhi went on that salt march, people would have thought, what can we do? It's so bad, the rules were so bad, the power was so concentrated, there were, huge human rights abuses, but people did do things. And in the end, it took many, many years, but they did get rid of the British Raj. Same for the civil rights movement. Now, in recent times, we got rid of the multilateral agreement on investment. That was about networking, about talking, about raising awareness. And I really think that there have been key positive examples when we have changed things. And we have to keep those at the forefront. Because if it all looks as if it's all too difficult, we just can't deal with it. As I said, just a few small steps from us every day will, in my opinion, carries a vibration. Somebody will listen about what you're doing and will hear, and somebody else will follow, and somebody else will follow. This festival itself is an example. All right? Thanks.
Judge, you just reminded me of the phrase that I heard not long ago, Gandhi's phrase, when talking to the people who said, the British are subjugating us. And he said, we are hundreds of millions. They are a few thousand. We are subjugating ourselves. Okay? You may think all the money is stacked with the corporates. Corporates fundamentally spend a lot of time, yes, trying to direct you to buy their products, but also very interested in what you are doing, what you are thinking, what are the trends. We can let them subjugate us with the existing system, or we can demand the different system. We do have power.
Thank you. Yeah. This might be the last one, I'm afraid, but we'll see how we go.
Okay, I'll try to be quick, and you've answered my question some way with divestment. There's been increasing discussion in the transition and permaculture movement about not just the inevitability of massive global economic collapse, but the recognition that the sooner it happens, the better the outcome for life on this planet. And this has been the discussion around David Holmgren's Crash on Demand recently. Do you believe there's merit in considering triggering this economic collapse in order to preserve life on the planet, considering that on the whole the most damaging industries and corporations are showing little sign of voluntarily stopping their destruction, and corrupt governments are just paying lip service to democracy?
I suppose I like to think we can go through something without terrible collapse, complete implosion of the system. Many have probably read Paul Gilding's book, The Great Disruption. He says, based on everything about the way humans behave, we're probably going to have to hit the wall, and then we'll pick ourselves up and do it differently. All I know is that wherever I go talking to business people, and I, not small business, but also directors in public companies, they are very focused on how to do sustainability within this existing paradigm. But people are vitally interested. There are very good, ethically sound people there, but they are working within the system. And I mean, they complain about this incredible fluctuation in governments that come and go, that put in carbon taxes, then throw them out. All this is changing. It does make it very hard for them to run businesses with some sort of stability. But, do we want economic collapse and the financial system to implode? I wouldn't choose that way, but, maybe it will come to that.
Look, just very quickly, I said at the beginning that I think the economics of solving this problem is easy. So I think it would be a pity if we sort of brought on collapse before we'd actually tried to do the easy stuff first. No, I mean that. I'm not trying to sound flippant. The premise of the question is, if we've got a system that's so destructive that it does that much harm, surely we've actually got a moral responsibility to turn it off today. I guess the reason I'm resistant to agreeing with that is because when you turn off the economic system that suddenly, you're probably going to turn off the rule of law at the same time. You're probably going to create some form of anarchy, which frankly we have spent 50,000 years moving away from. So that's a big price to pay. I think doing some simple economics first, would be a better start. But I think it's time to wrap up. I just think there's no doubt that we could change the world. The world today looks nothing like the world looked 50 years ago. It'll look entirely different in 50 years' time. The question, does it look 50 years better or 50 years worse? That's what we can change, and, well done for you guys for coming.
Yeah, on that note, thank you. Please thank our speakers once again. Thank you.